Hey, welcome to Academy 99 podcast. I'm Brother Gridden, Chris Lee. What's going on, brother?
Doing great, man. Thanks for having me. This is probably some of my favorite times of the week hanging out with you. So thank you.
Yeah, me too. The thing I like about doing business with you is I like hanging out with you. So it's really easy to be like, get in my calendar and be like, dude, we should have a business meeting today.
Yeah. Like, full disclosure, that's like one of the biggest reasons I wanted to start something with you is like, so we could just hang out more.
Yeah, no, I get it. It helps that we work well together. It helps that our coaching styles absolutely complement each other.
Yeah.
Based off of shared values, but probably how we go about everything else is polar opposites.
Yeah.
So anyways, question for you. I have no idea if this is going to be the length of this episode because sometimes we plan out, let's talk about this. And then sometimes it's like, Brad's got questions. But I've got an answer for this because I've been thinking about this for about 12 years. But I'm really curious because I've never asked you, what would you say is the number one driving force for growth? The number one factor in growth.
You froze up right when you asked the question, so I missed all of it. So,
and I've never shared that with anyone before. So, just maybe I could get some reflection on that vulnerability. Yeah, okay, no worries. What would you say is the number one factor in somebody's growth? So maybe it's somebody who has been living what I'm going to call is like a sedentary life.
Sure.
Like not just physically, like all of life has just not been moving. And then something happens and that, they start going after it in life. Or they've been going after it from the time they were 2.
Right.
Same factor for both. What would you say is the number one driving force or the number one factor in actual growth?
That growth happens or is brought about in a couple different ways. The first way is like hitting rock bottom, and I immediately think of like David Goggins. He was miserable with where he was in life, and he's like, things have to change, and then they did, and as a result, because he hit in his mind rock bottom, he changed his life completely, and now he's off doing amazing things, right? So I think that's a factor. Now,
I call that the pain factor. The pain of staying where you are becomes greater than the pain required to change.
Right. I think the other example that you provided, which is like somebody that's just like kind of always that way, it's like the first thing that comes to mind is actually it's lack of fear of looking dumb. So it's they're not afraid to try new things and to get their hands dirty and to like mess up a lot because they're not afraid of that, of looking like a failure. And as a result, it's like they try a bunch of different things and sometimes get really good at it. Now that I'm kind of like beating around the answer, I guess, but I think that mentality is great. I think that mentality is great if you want to get good at a lot of things, because then you just try new things all the time. Now, if you're talking about like Olympic athletes that have been training since they were small, like maybe distance runners or gymnasts or something like that, that I think is environment. It's, obviously when they're 4 years old and they're first walking out onto the tumbling mats, their mom and dad brought them there. You know what I mean? And
those are my cousins. Both of my cousins have been wrestling since they were 6.
Right. Exactly.
Right? And so their dad, Northwestern Pennsylvania, just threw them out on the mat when they turned 6.
Yeah. Because the environment was, this is what we do.
This is what we do.
There was actually a really cool study. This guy, his hypothesis was that geniuses can be made. And genius can refer to like more than just intellectual pursuits. But in this particular example, he used his daughters as the experiment. And so he just, in his house, he made chess the coolest thing ever. And so he had like posters of chess champions on the walls. He had his girls playing chess from the time they were super tiny and just constantly playing all the time. And then they just grew up to love it. And then they both became like, grandmasters and world champions and that type of thing. And so again, that was the environment that was instilled in them. And it was like constant, but it's not like they do it begrudgingly. It's like they learn to love it.
Do you know his name? Do you remember his name or the name of the book?
I can't remember off the top of my head, but it was a super interesting study because he was right. It's, geniuses are, you can make them.
Right. I'm just looking it up because I can.
Yeah.
Laszlo Polgar?
Sounds right.
Hungarian chess. Yeah, anyways. It's a great name, Laszlo Polgar. No, that makes sense. In the interesting thing that I have experienced and then seen in other people and then with clients, help clients work through is in that latter, not the Goggins section, but that latter section of just always trying to achieve or overachieve.
Right.
And so being willing to fail is there is no path to success without massive failure repeated. Like, I'm just convinced of that. You're just going to fail over and over. And those are the times, and I'm totally speaking from personal experience, where you're like, God, this isn't working. This isn't working. You feel like you've tried everything, and maybe you've tried 25 things. And 25 is a long way mathematically from everything.
Right.
Agreed? Right. But then, and so it does feel like constant failure over and over again. At first, it doesn't feel like that. At first, it feels like I don't know what I'm doing. And that hurts. But if you're willing to stick it out, but then you get to the place where, and this ties in a little bit to people having a fear of success, which whenever I talk about that, there's always a portion of people who respond like, that's BS. There's no such thing as fear of success. But when you get here, and it's really easy to go down. Like, I remember Masson Kip talking to me about, when he went on Oprah, and then Kim Kardashian tweeted out one of his tweets, and he just blew up, and his business blew up.
Yep.
And it was great. He never had a fear of flying until then, because all of a sudden his business was doing well. He had bought a house, and he was like, what if I die on this flight? I lose all this stuff.
Right.
It's just a real thing. So, but you get to this point where it's just like, well, I can't fail now because I'll look like an idiot, and I've gained too much to fail and look like an idiot. And so the very thing that gets you to where you are, you abandon, because what if I fail?
Too much is at stake at that point. That's an interesting, I've always thought, since you and I read Wild at Heart together, like there is a sense of fear of success at some point. And maybe it is once you achieve a certain amount, it's like, am I able to maintain this level of performance or whatever? Going back to kind of that example of not being afraid to fail, I think it's as easy as a mindset shift. So Mark Manson put out a couple of books. One of them is Models, and I think this is where the story comes from. But he told the story of where he and his guy friends would go out to the bar to pick up chicks or whatever. And when you approach that situation, it's scary because it's like, man, what if I get rejected? That's embarrassing. That's frustrating. Whatever. But then they all just turned it into a big game, and it's like, all right, whoever gets 10 rejections first is the winner. So now you're like seeking out that like rejection, because it's like, all right, sweet, and because you're winning a game, and then when they interestingly, they got rejected less as a result, because there was zero pressure that they put on themselves, and they could just be like natural and just hang out. And there was no real cost to the engagement. They were just having a good time and meeting new people, right? And so sometimes it's as easy as a mindset shift, I think, in regards to like when you are struggling with like a fear of failure. But yeah, as simple as like the mindset shift of, what if it takes 100 failures to get to that one success? Well, then you can start to look at it like, well, it's only 100 failures. Like, how eager are you to start burning through those like rejections?
When you can see the payoff, right?
Yeah. So I don't know, like particularly like with business and stuff. I think it was Mark Cuban that said, you only have to hit a home run once and then you're good. And so like, who cares how many times you strike out? You just got to hit that one, and I buy into that. It's like, yeah, let's keep pushing towards things that you think work. And if they don't work, you learn something from it and then let's do the next one.
If you keep that mentality, it works because you're going to hit another home run.
Right.
If you're, we need to do a whole episode on identity, which I'm sure we will, because that's one thing both you and I work on with people.
Right.
But if you expand that identity, but then you don't ground it into that new place and it snaps back like a rubber band, the home run paid some bills or whatever, but then you find you're like, oh, snap, is my business going to survive?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I think the connection I see between the person who hits rock bottom and then the person who's always had that drive is, for me, that one factor is I refer to it as hunger, and that's got a couple legs to it.
Sure.
There's a couple ingredients in that dish, but they're so hungry and become so hungry for whatever reason. So the guy on the rock bottom becomes hungry because I'm so sick and tired of being here. Right. And the person who's always been an achiever or overachiever and performer is just always hungry until they're not, Yeah. But that's the common denominator I find in growth. I'm going to call them growth spurts. For people who are growing is just this desire or this desperation or this drive. And I personally had seasons where I wasn't hungry. And it makes sense, particularly in our culture, because there's so much junk food, spiritually, psychologically, relationally. There's so much junk food that it's easy to just not be hungry.
Yeah.
Comfort.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
So
yeah,
go ahead.
I was gonna say like that lack of hunger often comes with just like distraction, whether that's scrolling social media or Netflix or whatever. It can dull that sense of hunger because you're satiated a little bit with entertainment. But if you accumulate too much of that distraction over the course of a decade, how much progress have you lost because you never engaged?
Yeah, you said satiated a little bit. Satiated like a lot, like
right.
Obese from satiation.
Right. Yeah.
Part of what I've done with myself and what I've done with other people is, twofold. You do this too. I'm really big on, to stoke hunger, getting down to somebody's why.
Yeah.
Why are you on? And I mean that in the broadest sense, in the deepest sense. Like, why are you on the planet? What is your purpose? What are you here for? What do you? And really, it's not like, oh, I discovered from God that I have this purpose. It's way more about, and you can, sure, whatever,
sure,
but so I'm not down talking that, but it's way more about, this is what I believe I'm actually here for. this is what I choose my purpose to be.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's in a season,
Right.
I tell people all the time, like, if they don't go through the exercise to really kind of hone that in and get connected to that, pick a purpose. Any purpose is better than no purpose. It's sort of like a plan. A bad plan is better than no plan.
Agreed. Yeah. And I, I not only talk about that with folks I work with, but I also like try to dig into that myself. It's like, yeah, what is my purpose? Well, maybe I get to pick, maybe I get to choose what I derive meaning from in this life, and how I'm going to act on that purpose,
Yeah.
And I think that scares people too, because they don't want to make the wrong answer. They don't want to pick the wrong purpose, and as a result, that can lead to stagnation, and it can lead to inaction, which is a decision in itself.
Yeah, I know. We've had to talk about this before, but the General Schwarzkopf story, when he was before he was a general, he was a general's aide.
Uh-huh.
Have we talked about that?
Where maybe remind me.
So when he was a general's aide to his general came to him and said, "Hey, there's a decision that needs to be made in our branch, and this decision is probably going to affect some policies and billions of dollars over the next 5 to 10 years." And so General Schwarzkopf, I almost just called him Schwarzkopf, but how disrespectful would that be? General Schwarzkopf, he dove in with his team, and in like 6 months doing all this research, and they whittled it down to plan A and plan B, and had like a 4-hour meeting with the general that he was an aide to at the time. And so the general came in, and about 20 minutes into plan A being described, he's just like, "Stop there. Let's go with that one." And walked out. And General Schwarzkopf was like, "Okay, that's not cool." So he went and said, "Hey, the whole permission to speak freely," which is the legend. I don't know they actually said that, right? He's like, yeah, what's on your mind? He's like, how could you make such a flippant decision based off of 20 minutes? We got 3 hours and 20 minutes left. We haven't even gotten to plan B. And he was like, you've had this for 6 months. Once we get moving towards plan A, once we just get that started, we're going to know immediately or pretty quickly, is this going to work or not? And then we'll just change course, but we're not going to sit here any longer.
Yeah.
And that lesson has guided me a lot, and it's been very productive in my life.
Yeah. I think that's awesome. Cause yeah, sometimes, not sometimes, a lot of the time we get stuck with like analysis paralysis, and we just do all the research to try to figure out what the right answer is. Man, sometimes it just take that first step. If it's wrong, adjust fire.
I think so. Yeah, like the right answer is the one you start taking actions towards.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Right. Like,
yeah,
we have this right and wrong. I do have a moral compass and values. Mm-hmm. There are things I think are right and things I think are wrong, but most decisions aren't black and white. Oh, if you make this decision, it's right. It's usually most decisions are shades of right for most people, majority of people. They're like, well, what's the best thing to do? Moving is the best thing to do. So pick something.
Yeah.
And run with it.
Yeah. I agree. Cause then you get like real time data on whether or not it's going to work, and as opposed to, doing thought experiments and trying to analyze prior to any action, like, well, what's the probability? It's like, no, just, start running with it, see what happens. And maybe pick the wrong choice. And it's like, all right, well, I figured something out there,
that didn't work.
Right.
Back to your fail forward or your fail to success. So yeah, that why to me that's going to stoke hunger. I think having a really as clear as you can have vision, like in detail of what you want your future to be.
Mm-hmm.
In several futures, 1 year, 5 year, 10 year, 20 year, which is always adjusting as you move forward into those years. But like having a really clear, this is what I want. I think that helps stoke the hunger too, as well as, hundreds of ancillary benefits of that.
Sure.
I don't know that you subscribe to that too.
Yeah.
What for you? What else stokes that hunger? So, like eliminating junk food. I think we talked about that. Like, and we're like obviously not a Snickers bar, although I don't really care about Snickers. But like eliminating the junk food from all areas of your life, grounded in your why and your purpose, grounded in what you want your future to look like. What else for you is important to stoke that fire for desire?
For me personally, a lot of it just comes from curiosity. And what I mean by that is like, all right, I'm a human being on this planet at this time in history. How far can I go? How much potential can I actualize on? And so it's almost like an experiment. Like, how good of shape can I get in? How smart can I get? How financially successful or emotionally intelligent can I become? And for me, it's like I don't really see like an upper limit. With some exceptions. Like I'm never gonna play in the NBA. One, because I'm not tall enough. I don't
zero desire.
Zero desire, and I'm not very good at basketball. And but like, so I understand there are some limitations, but generally speaking, I can learn about new things every day, which makes me smarter. I can dive into like my emotional intelligence and learn to be more calm and more patient and a better listener. I can explore different avenues to become more financially successful, whatever that looks like. You know what I mean? And so for me, a lot of it is curiosity. Like, how far can I push the human experience? And I don't want to be sitting in my rocking chair at 90 looking back and say, man, I could have done way more, but I was too distracted with the empty calories of the metaphorical junk food that I filled my life with. I don't want that regret, because that I think is more painful than failing.
Yeah. My biggest piece of advice, if you want to be challenged to be more calm and collected and handle chaos, have children. Like, don't have children for that reason. But once you have a kid, you're going to be challenged to be, how do I become more calm? How do I, operate in the midst of chaos? Because, geez. Anyways, that's my side hack. Yeah, that's another one that Phil Stutz, I believe his name's Barry Mickelson, talk about in their practice. Is they have an exercise, they call it one of the tools that they use for somebody to get them to do the thing they don't want to do, is to quickly, a few deep breaths, and then just visualize yourself on your deathbed filled with regret, crying out to you now, saying, get off your ass and do the thing. So I like the rocking chair too. In my rocking chair, I'm on a front porch in the South with a hand quilted blanket over my lap, sipping sweet tea, which I hate sweet tea. I know you like it, runs through your veins, but I can't stand it. I'm just like, ugh, why do people drink this bittersweet, how urine, but it's another conversation. Okay. So yeah, like curiosity. I totally buy into that. I'll pitch my tent in that camp. I don't know if that's a saying or not. But
I like it.
It is now.
We'll start using it.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on growth factors and hunger?
Growth is a choice, for sure. It doesn't happen by accident. Just like, working out. You don't get in shape by accident. You don't become a bodybuilder by accident. That takes very serious dedication and intention. In the same way with any endeavor, like if you want to be the smartest philosopher in modern times, that's going to require a great deal of intention and dedication behind it. So like if you're interested in growth at all, you have to actually do it, and you have to take the action. But I think some people are in love with the idea of growth and not in love with the actual process. And so I think that's what gets people to stumble a lot.
Yeah, I think is it Covey? It talks about it. I'm sure there's lots of people who do.
Sure.
Stephen Covey, and then Franklin, I believe is his son. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Great book, by the way. It's got to be like 100 years old by now. That everything is created first in the mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then it's created again in reality. And you and I are on record, recorded, talking about this before. For sure, this is concurrent with all my experience and then with other people. And I just call it the line in the sand. Like, you make a decision first. And then after that decision is made, and a lot of times that decision happens when you're rock bottom or when you decide things are going to have to change. You make that decision for change and then you pursue it. And is it Seneca? No, it's Nietzsche who says, if your why is powerful enough, it will outweigh the how every time. He doesn't say the every time part. Yeah. And I'm certain I didn't quote him exactly, but I know that he penned that. That is just, you're going to make the decision first. And once you make the decision, then it's, what are we doing?
Yeah.
And how are we doing it?
Yeah. You've got a thought or a philosophy that's like, a decision isn't really made until action is taken. You can think through process and you can say you've decided, but that decision actually hasn't happened until you've taken that first action towards it. And I totally buy into that. And it's like thought, planning, vision has to be coupled with action for it to mean anything.
Lots of people disagree with us, and it's not a great story. Like the great story, the hero's journey
right.
is you trip into the mythic realm, the mystic realm. But I think even there, Luke Skywalker decides because of an event, his aunt and uncle being killed, but it's still a decision. Like, okay, I'm following this guy now. And that's what I'm going to be about for a while as I step across this threshold. And lots of smart people disagree with me, but I don't care. It's just, for me, it's been that way. They'll want to. It's got to be more than want to. Like, you don't actually want to unless you're already taking steps, unless you're already taking action. Then I know you want to. And it's the same way for me. When I quit smoking, I wanted to quit smoking for a while. And I was young, but it still was like, at some point I was like, man, I got to stop this. And then it was probably like another year before I was like, oh, I've tried quitting 10 times, and this time I want to, I'm making the decision. Yeah. It's done.
Yeah, no, I buy into that for sure.
Sweet, man. This might be a record. For sure, it's a record for us. Shortest episode.
A record, you think?
record for us. PR. It's one of our PRs. But yeah, there's no promise. Any final thoughts?
I lost you for a second, so I don't know if you had closing thoughts. Or...
I've already used all my pause jokes, all my froze jokes. Any final thoughts? That's what I said.
Yeah. Final thoughts. Growth is vital if you want to have any kind of substantial life. And it can be, I think it can also become an addiction, like the addiction to, like, am I growing enough? So be mindful of that. So sometimes it's important to acknowledge, where you've come from, and where the growth that's already taken place is to measure as like a benchmark to say, all right, I'm on the right track. I'm still moving forward. Growth's a good thing. Everybody should do it.
Yeah. Is it Seneca or Aurelius who says, the fool with all his other faults has this also, he's always getting ready to live. And the reason why I love that quote is any time, anyone, any day, anyone can decide, I want to make a change.
Yeah.
If you can get out of whatever mire you're in for a moment to breathe and have some clarity and believe enough to make a decision, then pedal to the floor.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Cool, man. Listen, thanks for joining me for this train wreck of a frozen periods of frozen. If I edit out all the freezing, people are going to be like, what are you guys talking about? So maybe I'll just leave them in, but that's boring.
But maybe we'll figure out the internet next time. You're frozen again.
Go figure out the internet. That's a challenge. I'll take it.
Yeah.
All right, man. I'll chat with you later.
All right. Later, dude.